Deptford has a special and spectacular 2,000-year history. It's a tale of firsts, from the first frigate to the first urban railway. Long known as the cradle of the Navy, it was also the birthplace of monorail, steam navigation, assembly line production, Navy biscuits, and large-scale power generation. It's been owned or controlled by a series of England's most powerful people. Its critical position on the major Roman road from Dover to London made it the scene for some of the most dramatic moments in English history. It's also home to one of only 6 tidal creeks in London. Deptford Creek flows into the Thames between Greenwich and Deptford from the Ravensbourne River. Once a place of thriving industry, the creek has been neglected in recent years. But Deptford Creek is a unique and exciting place. It belongs to local people, and local people can help determine its future. Deptford played a key role in the development of early industrialisation and international commerce on the Thames during the 16th and 17th centuries, and was a centre for the earliest naval shipbuilding. Sir Francis Drake, the famous explorer and sailor, was knighted by Queen Elizabeth I on board his ship at Deptford in 1581. Later, Drake's ship the Golden Hind was preserved in Deptford for many years to honour his achievements. Some believe that the remains of the ship are buried behind one of the walls of the creek. Deptford Creek has a rich history of settlement dating back over 1,000 years. From the 12th century until the 1960s, Deptford Bridge was the focus for milling, distillery, brewing and associated industries. From the 17th century, ink, dye and soap were manufactured at Deptford. Throughout the 19th century, the industrialisation of the Creekside area continued with the establishment of further shipbuilding concerns, timber yards, distilleries and mills. The creek mouth was the site of Trinity House, built in 1513, which was later responsible for all the lighthouses around the coast of Britain. An archaeological dig taking place in autumn 1997 on the Fairview building site uncovered the remains of the Trinity Almshouses, the East India Company and the General Steam Navigation Yard were also situated here. To the west of the area is the site of Henry VIII's Royal Naval Dockyard. In 1889, the first industrial power station in the world was opened at Deptford by the young genius Sebastian di Ferranti. These buildings have recently been demolished, and this is now the Fairview building site at the mouth of the creek. Within this site are the Hoy Inn stairs, owned by the pub, a set of 19th century watermen's steps. These steps also form part of the flood defence. The creek has been a thriving working river since the early 16th century. An unbroken tradition of shipbuilding and waterborne commerce continued for 450 years on the Deptford waterfront until the decline of the docklands in the late 20th century.
Deptford was the home of the British Navy and had a thriving shipbuilding industry. Unfortunately, the docks went into decline in the early 1970s, and the creek itself could now be described as a relic to its naval and shipping past. However, it could once again function as a base for boating and industry. The creek presently has only one industrial user, Pryor's Aggregate, who transport sand and gravel by boat from Colchester to Deptford. However, there are people actually living in and working on boats on Deptford Creek. The river can also provide an environmentally friendly form of transport for both people and goods, helping to prevent congested traffic in the surrounding roads. One boat can carry the equivalent load of 70 lorries. There are already working wharves within the area, with the potential for more to be reinstated. Thames sailing barges, which were originally developed in late Tudor times, also feature in the history of Deptford Creek. Of the 3 barge building yards in the 19th century, famous for producing what were known as barges of genius. 2 were in Deptford. Also on the Greenwich bank of the creek is Wood Wharf, a boat and barge building yard since around 1700. Unfortunately, it closed last year, and the future of this site is in the hands of developers. It is very close to Cutty Sark Gardens, which is historically important. Beyond the landing stage on the Fairview building site, where the old power station used to be, large boats can be seen at Convoy's Wharf. It is intended that the landing stage may once again become a place where visiting boats can stop regularly. On the east side of the creek mouth, by Greenwich Reach, there is a natural deep hole in the riverbed where boats are able to moor at all times of the tide, and a cruise terminal is being planned here. People will be able to step from their boats and visit Deptford and its creek. Deptford Creek is one of only 6 tidal creeks in London. The others are at Bow, Barking, Wandle, Chelsea and Lee. The walls flanking the creek play a vital role in flood defence and are also the homes of many species of plants and animals. If the western walls fail, the Thames could flood as far as Lambeth, and if the eastern walls fail, all of Greenwich town centre could be flooded. Unlike any other surviving creek in London, the walls are fronted with a variety of materials combined in a variety of ways, rather than being jacketed in steel. This complexity, combined with the age of the walls, has created the opportunity for the diversity of plant life they support. 5 of the existing creek walls are due for replacement within the next 5 years. Most of these are the best walls in terms of habitats for wildlife. Some people have proposed flooding the creek so that the creek bed of slimy mud and rubbish can never be seen. The Environment Agency, responsible for flood defences, is working with landowners and local environmental groups to try and ensure that the devastation to wildlife is minimal. Fairview have responsibility for the walls on the power station site. They were proposing to replace them with sheet steel piling, which is the cheapest but least ecologically friendly method. The Environment Agency is assuring that Fairview will consider the environmental aspects of the creek wall replacement and will not accept the use of sheet steel piling.
There's general agreement that the creek at low tide has the appearance of a mud bath full of shopping trolleys. Something must be done about the rubbish swamping the creek. Not only is it unsightly and smelly, but many items cause hazards to boaters and wildlife. There are 4 main interests involved: wildlife and habitats, archaeology and history, boating, and the look of the creek for pedestrians. Property developers will be interested in the aesthetics and will need to be convinced of the value of the creek. Boaters will want to remove sharp rubbish or entangling rubbish that puncture holes at low tide or get stuck in the propellers of boats. The easiest solution would be to dredge the creek of all the unwanted and unsightly objects. But it's not that simple. There are several things that need to be considered when clearing the rubbish. We must be aware of the importance of some forms of rubbish and consider potential replacements. For example, shopping trolleys are habitats for wildlife. We do not know how the removal of rubbish from the creek will affect the present environment, and so it's important to begin removing items slowly and with care, and to replace structures that have become habitats. In a recent count, 480 trolleys were found. During times of heavy rain, the creek becomes choked with trolleys. Mainly they come from supermarkets in Lewisham, but some have been identified as coming from as far as the Savour Centre in Bell Green. But we can't just remove the trolleys without remembering that they've become homes for invertebrates and fish. And we have to think of ways of what we can replace them with that will provide a similar environment but look more attractive to humans.
The thing to remember about Deptford Creek is it's tidal. The North Sea comes steaming up the River Thames, steaming up the River Ravensbourne twice a day and goes out again. When you see the river full, that's the North Sea. When you see the little thin trickle at the bottom, That's the Thames, and that's the Ravensbourne going down into the Thames. The Ravensbourne is crystal clear, sweet water. North Sea is salty and silt laden. Now, the basis of most of the life in the creek is the vegetation. So you get algal mats on the mud, the glorious mud, full of life, full of worms, full of all sorts of creatures living there, which are the basis of the food for the birds using the creek. Most of the higher plants on the creek, all they've got is a sheer face of the creek wall. So you have to remember that over the last few centuries, the creek has been cabined, cribbed, confined. It's been pushed in, narrowed, narrowed, narrowed. So all there is now is just a sheer vertical channel. And on the channel you can see that the walls have got holes, cracks in the concrete. You've got wooden fenders, rubbing posts, and on those rotten fenders, rotten rubbing posts, vegetation has become established. And there's over 120 species of plants utilising that habitat. It's an extremely harsh environment. And there's a mixture of all sorts of plants growing there. It's a truly international community, typical of urban areas, characteristic of London's wasteland, in this case of sort of a watery wasteland. So we get plants like the Angelica archangelica, which is the garden angelica, which has escaped from gardens where it was grown for culinary uses. It's now a real feature of the Thames, and Deptford Creek is one of its strongholds. If you look at the walls in Deptford Creek, they're extremely old, and they support an extremely diverse range of flora. Most of the Thames walls in London, they don't support very much at all. They're virtually lifeless. Deptford Creek's walls, they're full of life. Other plants you get there are the hemlock water dropwort, glorious name. Never touch it, it's one of the most poisonous plants in the country. Don't eat it, but there's actually no reason why you would want to eat it. Range of other plants include things like rosebay willow herb. Here it's a picture of it growing on the Deptford Power Station site, which sadly is no more. You see Canary Wharf in the background. The other thing that we've done in London is modify the climate. We've got a huge area of built brick, concrete, tarmac everywhere, and that has completely modified the climate where we live. We're at least 2 degrees warmer than the surrounding countryside. So we get Mediterranean plants growing and thriving here. Things like that little beast, which is a fig, a wild fig tree growing on Deptford Creek. Would you believe it? And this is one of the exciting discoveries this year on the creek. That's the black redstart, very, very rare bird in this country. And on Deptford Creek this year, and on the land surrounding it, we had 2 pairs breeding. And that represents about 3% of the national breeding population in the whole of the country. So when you think of Deptford, think it does actually support nationally rare species. This is the thing about urban areas that people don't realise, that there are some extremely good wildlife sites here. Other birds we get, of course, are herons. They're in there daily, almost like dinosaurs coming in and spearing after fish. There's loads of fish in there, flounders, eels, gobies, stickleback. Other birds, mallards are there all the time. There are no mallards. Swans come up the river. And if you're lucky enough to see a bright iridescent whir steaming down the creek, you'll have seen a kingfisher. Other things, one of the other features of the creek is the grey wagtails, and you hear sort of the peep of them as they fly along the creek. And there's about 3 pairs of them breeding on the creek. And they're very distinctive. They wag their tails up and down all the time. Although they're called grey, they actually got a very distinctive yellow patch on the undersides of them. The challenge we've got now is there's a lot of things happening to Deptford Creek. There's a lot of development going on around about it. And the challenge that we all face is trying to conserve the wildlife communities that we've got in as tactile form as possible for future generations. And that's
It is inevitable that places change. If we continue to neglect Deptford Creek, it will still change. More rubbish will accumulate, the walls will disintegrate. Development has already begun. the Docklands Light Railway are building an extension through Creekside, and Fairview Homes have begun preparing the old power station site ready for building. DLR began works to extend their railway line from Canary Wharf to Lewisham in December 1996. This will directly link Creekside with Docklands, Stratford and the city. There will be a station on Deptford Broadway. This, along with the Jubilee Line extension to Greenwich, will improve public transport facilities in the area and allow more people to visit Deptford. Fairview Homes are planning to build 650 new homes on the creek mouth. Their proposals include some commercial and office buildings too. This will mean many more people will come to live in this area. The site will have a pedestrian and cycle route along the waterfront, eventually creating a through route to Greenwich. The power station landing stage, a 200-metre-long hulk out in the Thames, will also become a public space if plans promoted by local people, a condition of planning permission, go ahead. They will provide public access to the waterfront along the river and the creek. The Halfpenny Hatch project is seeking to rebuild a pedestrian bridge that historically crossed Deptford Creek attached to the railway viaduct. The bridge would reconnect the towns of Deptford and Greenwich and would become an important part of the local pedestrian and cycle network. A cycle route is planned linking Deptford to Greenwich, and there are hopes to link the Thames cycle route to the proposed Waterlink Way route to run between Deptford and Bromley along the River Ravensbourne. The Deptford Community Boatyard project aims to establish a boatyard with public mooring, a community sailing club and a clubhouse at Lower Watergate. Part of this project is to restore a 100-year-old Thames sailing barge called Niagara. The barge may be moved up the creek to Lewisham College for much of its restoration. The British Gas site provides one opportunity for a site of ecological importance. Consideration should be given to habitat creation. The site should be managed as a nature park. Once the DLR works are complete, the Thames water site may be unsuitable for other uses, but it could be an opportunity to establish a wildlife habitat. It's also hoped that it will become a site of a new educational centre where people can visit the creek. Most people who pass through Deptford do not know about its historical importance or the importance of the creek. New development often results in alienating a community which already exists, as has happened in Docklands across the river. Developers must take into account the history and community that is the home to the people who already live in the area, and work with them to improve leisure, transport, housing, business and employment opportunities. Regenerating Deptford Creek could result in one of two consequences. One, it will destroy what is left of a rich history and community, and the population will become more isolated, as in the Docklands. Two, it will improve the area for the people who already live here and make it attractive to newcomers and visitors by establishing safe streets with pedestrian priority and disabled access, improving road crossing facilities, encouraging a network of links to connect Deptford and Greenwich, creating public spaces where people will want to gather, establishing access to the creek for boat owners, and seeking opportunities to provide habitat for wildlife, recreational activities and community involvement.